When this starts happening to you, don't question your sanity. You're beginning to emerge. The pursuits that once seemed essential suddenly feel empty. Social exchanges that used to fuel you now leave you depleted. You've lost interest in competing, accumulating, or convincing others. This isn't numbness. This isn't withdrawal. This is something infinitely more significant and transformative. You've started experiencing yourself as the witness of your existence, rather than its central figure. While this might feel disconnecting, perhaps isolating, it's actually the initial indicator that your quantum awareness is coming online. The process begins quietly. Perhaps you're moving through your routine when you sense an unusual distance, as though you're observing yourself from outside a movie. You register your mental chatter, but it no longer feels like absolute truth. It feels like conditioning. You notice feelings arise, but rather than being overwhelmed, you watch them move through like changing weather patterns. You begin to see that your persona, your label, your past, your functions aren't your true essence, but costumes you've habitually worn. And suddenly, you feel drawn to shed them. Pause for a moment and share in the comments below. What old pattern or identity are you feeling called to release as you recognize it's no longer serving your highest expression? This isn't spiritual escapism. This isn't avoidance. This is a frequency transformation, the start of a profound internal recalibration that occurs when your awareness exceeds the boundaries of social programming. Your true essence, your genuine self, begins separating from external form. And within that separation, something timeless and instinctive starts awakening. You no longer feel like the person you were because you aren't. You're encountering what spiritual traditions have termed enlightenment, and what consciousness researcher Amit Goswami describes as the moment you understand that awareness isn't contained within the physical body. The physical body exists within awareness. With this understanding, existence itself becomes malleable. You begin questioning beliefs you previously accepted without examination. You wonder if your decisions have ever truly been autonomous. You start sensing that you're living between two realities, the one you've been taught to consider real, and another you're now beginning to perceive. A dimension constructed not from physical matter, but from consciousness itself. You may encounter periods of profound synchronicity, instances where intentions materialize more rapidly than before or where temporal perception shifts. These aren't coincidences. They're indicators that your energetic field is becoming more receptive and more dynamic. But this is where confusion enters. Your external circumstances may appear unchanged. Your occupation remains the same. Your connections, your surroundings, your daily practices haven't transformed. Yet you have. Since the outside world continues reflecting the previous frequency, you might start questioning what you're sensing internally. This represents the crossing point, the emptiness, the transitional space where your former identity is dissolving, but your emerging consciousness hasn't yet solidified. The temptation exists to retreat, to reconnect, to deny what you've glimpsed behind the facade. But return is impossible because once awakening begins, you cannot reverse your vision. You cannot unlearn what you've discovered. The curtain doesn't close again. This stage where logic fails but everything feels harmonious is holy. It's where your quantum awareness initiates its surfacing, not through concepts or instruction, but through immediate knowing, through the dismantling of who you believed yourself to be, through the uncertainty of not knowing what emerges next, and the profound stillness of no longer requiring certainty. You're starting to understand that your mind isn't here to endure reality. It's here to craft it. And this realization transforms everything. Consider the possibility that everything you've learned about existence is inverted. From birth, you've been programmed to believe that the external world, tangible, measurable, objective, creates your inner experience. That awareness is merely a consequence of neural activity. That consciousness follows matter. But what if this is false? What if it's always been false? The conventional scientific framework suggests the universe originated with particles, forces, dimensions, time, and eventually, consciousness somehow appeared. Yet this model encounters limitations when attempting to explain observation, innovation, intuition, or the fundamental act of choosing. It fails to account for your inner reality, the aspect of you that senses, perceives, and decides. This is precisely where quantum mechanics begins dismantling the illusion. Within quantum reality, nothing exists as fixed until it's witnessed. Particles don't exist as objects. They exist as possibilities, as fields of potential. Only when a conscious witness engages does the field crystallize into a particle, into matter, into manifested reality. This transcends philosophy. It's established physics, and it shatters the materialist worldview at its foundation. Here's where researchers like Amit Goswami advance further. He doesn't merely propose that consciousness influences reality. He asserts that consciousness is fundamental, that all existence originates within awareness. The physical universe isn't the source of your consciousness. Your consciousness is the field from which the physical universe emerges. You aren't contained within a body navigating through space. Your body, your brain, your complete existence exists within you, within your field of consciousness. Allow this to resonate. This means you aren't an entity observing other entities. You are the field witnessing itself. You are both the canvas and the artist, both the dreamer and the dream. When this transition occurs, when you recognize that your consciousness isn't limited to neurons or a skull, something extraordinary begins unfolding. The laws of cause and effect become fluid. Time expands, synchronicity multiplies, and you start recognizing that life isn't occurring to you, but through you. This transforms your approach to everything. Choices no longer operate through linear reasoning. They operate through resonance, through alignment. You don't merely think anymore. You sense. You feel into potentials. And in doing so, you start collapsing possibilities. Not unconsciously, but deliberately. You become the witness that selects, and that selection influences the field. Yet here's the contradiction. The more conscious you become, the less your rational mind can comprehend what's occurring. Because quantum consciousness isn't something the intellect grasps. It's something the self embodies. It's not a concept. It's a condition, a vibration, a return to the fundamental state of existence, not behind your perception, but behind reality itself. This is awakening, and it explains why, as your quantum consciousness activates, the world may appear identical but feel completely different. You observe others operating from old patterns, but you're no longer participating in the script. You hear discussions dominated by fear and ego, but your system doesn't engage. You're disconnecting, not in resistance, but in remembrance. You're remembering that you aren't the product of creation. You are creation becoming conscious of itself. This consciousness isn't exclusive or uncommon. It's inherent. it's your natural state. But in a reality designed around distraction, it's also transformative. Because once you reclaim it, once you operate from it, you stop playing the game of searching. You realize you were never lacking, never damaged, only unconscious of your infinite participation in the quantum choreography of creation. Eventually arrives a moment in every awakening where the framework of your identity begins crumbling. Not because you're flawed, but because the version of you constructed for survival is no longer necessary. It's disorienting, distressing, sometimes frightening because the structures you once depended upon, your title, your functions, your convictions, start feeling hollow, manufactured, and suddenly you recognize that much of what you labeled yourself was never genuinely you. This isn't termination. This is unweaving. And it's crucial because you cannot activate quantum consciousness while maintaining a mechanical identity. They vibrate at conflicting frequencies. One is inflexible, reactive, built from conditioning and survival. The other is adaptable, unlimited, aligned with presence and boundless possibility. To embody one, the other must dissolve. Initially, the ego resists this. It becomes alarmed. It struggles. It repeats familiar narratives. You're losing stability. You don't recognize yourself anymore. Something's malfunctioning with you. But nothing is malfunctioning. What's occurring is that your awareness, your authentic self, is emerging from behind the persona, and the persona recognizes its time is ending. The ego isn't malevolent. It's simply obsolete. It was created to shield you in a world that dictated your identity. It collected information from your family, society, beliefs, wounds, and constructed an identity capable of navigating that terrain. But as your consciousness expands, the map no longer corresponds to the landscape. You see through the regulations, the conditioning, the controls, and you start questioning not just your thoughts, but the thinker itself. This is the dissolution of the programmed identity, and it's sacred. You begin recognizing thought patterns that no longer resonate, beliefs you never consciously chose, responses that feel foreign. It's like moving through a home you've inhabited for decades and suddenly realizing none of the possessions belong to you. This explains why awakening often resembles mourning. Not because you're perishing, but because the illusion is. The character you considered essential is fading, and in its place, space is expanding. Immense, tranquil space. And within that space, something more profound begins surfacing. You become the observer of your physical form. You experience emotions without being dominated by them. You register thoughts without being controlled by them. You stop identifying with the internal voice and begin watching it with curiosity, like a character in a story. And the more you observe, the more you understand, I am not this voice. I am the awareness that perceives it. This is what mystics have indicated for millennia, what quantum researchers like Amit Goswami now confirm, that you aren't a collection of thoughts and matter. You are consciousness itself expressing in this moment through this form, but not constrained to it. And the more you live from this awareness, the less the former self can maintain its hold. It starts losing influence, not because you battle it, but because you no longer accept it. This transformation isn't always dramatic. Often it's gentle. You awaken and realize you no longer want to debate. That seeking validation feels meaningless. That control is fantasy. That harmony matters more than being correct. And in that calmness, the quantum self, the version of you that isn't defined by history or biology, begins ascending. This self requires no story. It doesn't fear uncertainty. It's not pursuing results. It simply exists. Pure presence, pure awareness, pure potential. And as this self becomes your standard state, reality itself starts bending. Because the field doesn't respond to the ego. It responds to the self beyond the ego, the one who chooses from coherence, not confusion. So if you've felt displaced recently, if you're questioning your true identity, if everything seems to be dissolving, you're not deteriorating. You're awakening. The programming is dissolving. The illusion is clearing. And what remains is who you've always been. The conscious creator finally recognizing itself. There exists a sacred moment in every awakening when you cease asking, "Why is this occurring to me?" and start asking, "What am I generating now?" Until this point, you may have experienced life as something to endure or navigate, something happening near you and occasionally to you, but rarely through you. You may have believed your role was to witness, to remain aware, to avoid reacting. And yes, that's the foundation, the essential space between the conditioned self and the authentic self. But awakening doesn't conclude with observation. Eventually, you must claim the position of the creator, not through force, not through manipulation, but through coherent conscious presence. Because in the quantum field, observation collapses the possibility wave. And how you observe, the intention behind it, determines what crystallizes into form. If you observe through anxiety, you manifest what resonates with it. If you observe through clarity, you stabilize tranquility. Every decision you make, every feeling you maintain, every narrative you embrace, these are transmissions, directives, activations, and the field responds not to your words, but to your essence. This is where you stop responding to situations and start creating realities, not instantaneously, not with complete control, but through consistent alignment. You start recognizing that your frequency isn't incidental. It's your offering. You are no longer merely interpreting the field. You are composing it, and the field responds accordingly. You begin noticing synchronicities, not random, but rhythmic. The perfect words at the perfect moment. The person who reaches out exactly when you were considering them. Insights that appear from nowhere. Time expanding or contracting in unusual ways. Life starts flowing with you because you've stopped fighting it. You're no longer attempting to force reality into your desires. You've become receptive to something deeper, to the version of reality that already corresponds with who you truly are. And it's within this space that the genuine quantum transformation occurs. When you understand that the external world isn't something to pursue, it's something to reflect. That the field mirrors not your goals, but your identity. You don't attract what you desire. You attract what you're harmonious with. So who are you being in this instant? Not yesterday, not after your next breakthrough session, not when you finally understand everything, right now. What are you emanating? Are you still existing as the echo of your past, or as the frequency of your future? Because you cannot collapse a new timeline from an outdated state of being. You can't create abundance from scarcity, clarity from confusion, love from fear. The field doesn't respond to effort. It responds to frequency. And the moment you align your inner reality with your chosen existence without proof, without certainty, without requiring validation, the transformation begins. And that's the moment you realize the observer was always the creator. Now, if this speaks to where you are, If you're no longer just observing your life but ready to shape it, let it resonate in the field by commenting, "I'm not just a mind. I am the field." Because when you declare who you are from a place of knowing, the universe doesn't just acknowledge it, it reorganizes itself around it. What does it truly look like to live from quantum consciousness? Not just during meditation, not just when you're feeling centered or inspired, but in the chaotic, mundane, sometimes overwhelming moments of daily existence. This is the ultimate integration. When the insights you've received become your natural state of being. When your identity is no longer a mask you remember to wear, but a frequency you effortlessly embody. You start noticing that your reactions have decelerated. Not because you're forcing peace, but because the provocation simply doesn't register anymore. Someone acts aggressively in traffic and you remain centered. An old pattern gets triggered and you witness, not collapse. You don't suppress feeling. You just stop being controlled by it, because you're no longer reacting from the self that was programmed to survive. You're responding from the self that remembers. I am not the experience. I am the field witnessing the experience. And this transformation starts affecting everything. Conversations deepen because you're no longer speaking to defend or perform. You're listening through presence. Relationships evolve because you stop expecting others to complete a wholeness you've already discovered within yourself. Even your work begins to transform. Tasks that used to feel burdensome now flow with fresh clarity because you're moving from alignment, not duty. You stop forcing. You start attracting. You stop proving. You start emanating. From the outside, it might appear like you're doing the same activities, but internally everything has shifted because your reference point is no longer external. It's vibrational. It's internal. It's the self grounded in awareness. And with that grounding, your choices become more refined. You stop asking, "Is this the correct decision?" and start asking, "Is this the correct frequency?" You sense into timelines, not just results. You trust the guidance of intuition over the logic of fear. And in doing so, you collapse new versions of reality. Not through effort, but through coherence. This is what it means to live as your quantum self. Not floating above existence, but moving through it with embodied sovereignty. Not avoiding difficulty, but witnessing it from a deeper center. Not requiring control, but trusting calibration. And yes, you'll still encounter challenges. Yes, you'll still meet resistance, but you'll relate to those moments differently. You'll remember this too is part of the field. And in remembering, you reclaim your power because nothing that appears in your experience is accidental. It's all information, a reflection of your signal. And if you don't like the reflection, you don't battle the mirror. You adjust the source. This is the profound responsibility of quantum living. Knowing that while you can't control everything, you are the point of origin. Not of every event, but of your frequency in response to it. And that frequency, stable, clear, aligned, becomes your gateway. Amit Goswami often says you choose your reality through how you collapse possibilities, and every moment is a fresh choice, a fresh observation, a fresh vibration. The question is no longer, will existence align with me? But will I align with what I already know I am? Because the truth is, quantum consciousness isn't something you visit. It's something you stabilize. What we've explored today only touches the surface of this profound transformation. The complete journey from unconscious transmission to becoming the field itself requires understanding the 9 distinct frequencies of consciousness mastery, from breaking free from survival static to accessing the silent frequency of pure witness consciousness. If you're ready to dive deeper into this complete system of quantum consciousness activation, I've created a comprehensive guide called Beyond the Frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery. It walks you through the step-by-step practices for moving from seeking to being, from manifestation to embodiment. It's linked in the pinned comment below. By now, you may be sensing it, not just mentally, but physically. That quiet sense of return, not to history, not to a persona, but to something deeper, something original. A recognition that you've always been more than your label, your narrative, or your circumstances. That what you call awakening isn't a new condition. It's the revelation of what was always present. But here's the truth rarely shared. Awakening is only the beginning. The real journey is stabilization, and that's where most people disconnect. Not because they're weak or unfocused, but because the world around them hasn't shifted yet. You return to your environment, your relationships, your patterns. And if you're not anchored in the new frequency, the old one silently draws you back in. This is why the space between awakening and embodiment is so delicate and so sacred. It's where your quantum consciousness must become your operating system, not just your insight. Where you no longer visit presence during moments of peace, but live from it even in turbulence. Where your nervous system isn't waiting for external safety to regulate because it is the safety, the signal, the new center of gravity. And this is also where you realize that embodiment isn't about perfection. It's about return again and again. Realignment, reattunement, not from guilt or fear, but from love, from deep knowing, from the part of you that no longer wants to escape life, but to experience it fully, from the highest vibration you can hold. But let's go deeper into what this quantum consciousness activation actually looks like in the fabric of your everyday existence. Because understanding the theory is one thing. Living it is entirely another. When this transformation begins, it doesn't just change how you think about reality. It changes how reality thinks about you. Your relationship with time starts to shift in ways that defy conventional understanding. You've probably noticed this already. Moments when time seems to stretch, where a conversation that felt like hours was actually minutes, or instances where entire weeks passed in what felt like days. This isn't your imagination playing tricks. This is your consciousness learning to navigate what quantum physicists call nonlinear temporality. In the quantum field, time isn't a river flowing in one direction. It's an ocean of simultaneous possibilities. When your consciousness begins operating from this level, you start accessing what we might call temporal flexibility. You're not bound by the mechanical tick of the clock because you're operating from a dimension where all moments exist simultaneously. This is where the concept of timeline collapse becomes not just theoretical, but practical. You start sensing into different versions of your future, feeling into the vibrational signature of various possibilities. And here's what's remarkable. You begin to notice that your current state of being literally determines which timeline you're moving toward. Not your goals, not your plans, but your energetic coherence in this moment. Consider the quantum principle of entanglement. When two particles become entangled, they remain connected regardless of the distance separating them. A change in one instantly affects the other. As your consciousness expands, you start experiencing this entanglement with your own potential futures. You're not just hoping for change, you're quantum entangled with it. This is why synchronicity intensifies during awakening. Those meaningful coincidences aren't random events aligning by chance. They're evidence that your field is becoming entangled with matching frequencies across space and time. The person who calls exactly when you need to hear from them. The book that falls open to the precise page you need to read. The opportunity that emerges just as you're ready for it. These aren't accidents. They're quantum resonance. But here's where most spiritual teachings miss the mark. They treat manifestation like a mental process. Think positive thoughts, visualize outcomes, affirm your desires. Quantum consciousness reveals something far more profound. Manifestation isn't a mental activity. It's a coherent state. It's not about what you think. It's about what you are. When you're operating from quantum consciousness, you realize that every cell in your body is both receiving and transmitting information to the field. Your heart rhythm, your breathing pattern, your nervous system state. They're all broadcasting your vibrational signature. The field doesn't respond to your thoughts because it can't hear thoughts. It responds to the electromagnetic signature you're generating in each moment. This is why emotional coherence becomes so crucial in this process. When you're in states of fear, anxiety, or confusion, your heart rhythm becomes chaotic, incoherent. Your electromagnetic field becomes scattered, fragmented. You're essentially broadcasting static to the quantum field. But when you move into states of appreciation, compassion, or deep peace, your heart rhythm becomes coherent, ordered. Your field becomes clear, powerful, magnetic. This isn't New Age theory. This is measurable science. The HeartMath Institute has been documenting this for decades. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field that's 60 times greater in amplitude than your brain. And this field extends far beyond your physical body, interacting with other fields, with the environment, with the quantum vacuum itself. As your quantum consciousness activates, you start becoming conscious of this field. You begin to feel it, sense it, work with it intentionally. You realize that your presence is literally reshaping the energetic environment around you. People respond to you differently, not because you're acting differently, but because you're being differently. This is where the real power of quantum consciousness emerges. You're not trying to force outcomes. You're not attempting to manipulate reality. You're simply becoming coherent with the reality you choose to experience. And the field, which is always responsive, always listening, begins organizing itself around that coherence. But this activation doesn't happen in isolation. It's intimately connected to what quantum physicists call morphic resonance. The idea that information can be transmitted across space and time through field resonance. As you activate your quantum consciousness, you're not just changing your own reality. You're contributing to a field of consciousness that's available to everyone. This is why awakening often feels like remembering rather than learning. You're tapping into a field of information that already exists. The wisdom traditions have been pointing to this for millennia. The idea that all knowledge, all possibility, already exists in what they called the Akashic records, the collective unconscious, the field of infinite potential. Modern quantum physics is now confirming what mystics have always known. Information doesn't disappear. It becomes encoded in the structure of space-time itself. Every thought, every emotion, every experience leaves an imprint in the quantum field. And when your consciousness becomes subtle enough, sensitive enough, you can access this information directly. This is why intuition becomes so powerful during this process. You're not just guessing or hoping. You're accessing information from the field itself, that sudden knowing about which direction to take, that gut feeling about a person or situation, that inspiration that comes from nowhere. These aren't random neural firings. They're quantum downloads from the field of infinite intelligence. But perhaps the most profound shift happens in your relationship with what we call problems or challenges. From the perspective of ordinary consciousness, problems are obstacles to overcome, difficulties to solve, resistance to push through. But from quantum consciousness, you begin to see that what you've been calling problems are actually invitations to expand. Every challenge you encounter is the universe's way of showing you where your consciousness is still limited, where your field is still constricted. Instead of seeing obstacles, you start seeing opportunities for greater coherence, deeper alignment, expanded awareness. The challenge isn't happening to you. It's happening for you, through you, as you. This completely transforms your relationship with what you used to call negative emotions. Fear, anger, sadness. These aren't enemies to defeat. They're messengers from your quantum self, indicating where your consciousness is out of alignment with your truth. Instead of suppressing them or being controlled by them, you start using them as guidance systems, compass points directing you toward greater coherence. When fear arises, you don't judge it or fight it. You get curious about it. What is this fear showing me about where I'm not trusting the process? When anger emerges, you don't suppress it or act it out unconsciously. You investigate it. What is this anger revealing about where I'm not honoring my boundaries or my truth? This is emotional alchemy, the quantum art of transforming lower vibrational states into higher ones, not by denying them, but by understanding their message and choosing a more coherent response. It's not about bypassing your humanity. It's about bringing consciousness to your humanity. As this process deepens, you start recognizing that your entire life has been a curriculum designed for this awakening. Every relationship, every challenge, every victory, every loss, it's all been orchestrating this moment where you remember who you truly are. Nothing has been random. Nothing has been wasted. Everything has been contributing to this activation of your quantum consciousness. This is when forgiveness becomes effortless, not because you're trying to be spiritual or good, but because you realize that everyone in your life has been playing their perfect role in your awakening. Even those who hurt you, especially those who hurt you, have been serving your evolution. They've been showing you where you still had consciousness to reclaim, power to retrieve, love to remember. From this perspective, your entire biography becomes sacred. Every scar becomes a doorway. Every wound becomes a window. Every breakdown becomes a breakthrough. You realize that your consciousness has been using every experience to prepare you for this moment of awakening. But here's what's truly revolutionary about quantum consciousness. It reveals that healing doesn't happen in linear time. When you access the quantum field, you can literally transmute experiences that happened years or decades ago. You can send coherence backward through time to moments when you were unconscious, fragmented, in pain. You can change the energetic imprint of your past by changing your relationship to it in the present. This isn't just metaphysical speculation. Quantum physics reveals that the observer affects not just the present moment, but the entire timeline. When you observe your past from a place of love, compassion, and understanding, you're literally changing the vibrational signature of those experiences. You're collapsing them into healing rather than trauma. This is why people often experience spontaneous healing during awakening. Physical ailments that have persisted for years suddenly resolve. Emotional patterns that seemed permanent suddenly dissolve. Relationship dynamics that felt stuck suddenly shift. You're not just healing in the present. You're healing across time, changing the quantum signature of your entire existence. But let's explore something even more profound: how this quantum consciousness activation affects your relationship with what we call death and birth, endings and beginnings. From ordinary consciousness, these appear as separate events, distinct moments in time. But from quantum awareness, you start recognizing that every moment contains both death and birth simultaneously. Each breath you take is both an ending and a beginning. Each thought that dissolves makes space for new awareness to emerge. Each old identity that falls away creates room for greater truth to surface. You begin to see that what you've been calling your life is actually an infinite series of deaths and rebirths happening at the quantum level. Moment by moment, cell by cell, consciousness by consciousness. This understanding radically transforms your relationship with change. Instead of fearing transitions, you start recognizing them as natural expressions of quantum reality. The job that ends, the relationship that transforms, the belief system that crumbles. These aren't failures or losses. They're consciousness shedding outdated forms to make space for new expressions of itself. You start to understand that consciousness is like water. It takes the shape of whatever container it's in, but its essential nature remains unchanged. When a wave crashes on the shore, the water doesn't disappear. It simply returns to the ocean, ready to form new waves, new expressions, new experiences. Your individual consciousness operates the same way within the infinite ocean of universal consciousness. This is why during quantum consciousness activation, many people experience what feels like ego death. It's not that the ego is being destroyed. It's that consciousness is recognizing it was never limited to the ego in the first place. The wave realizes it was always the ocean. The drop discovers it was always the sea. And with this recognition comes something extraordinary: the ability to consciously participate in your own evolution. Instead of being at the mercy of unconscious patterns, genetic programming, or social conditioning, you start choosing your thoughts, emotions, and responses from a place of awareness. You become the conscious co-creator of your own becoming. This is where quantum consciousness reveals one of its most practical applications: the ability to consciously evolve your DNA expression. We now know through epigenetics that your genes are not your destiny. Environmental factors, including your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs, directly influence which genes get activated and which remain dormant. When you're living from quantum consciousness, you're no longer a victim of your genetics. You're consciously signaling your genes through your states of being. States of love, joy, and coherence activate genes associated with healing, creativity, and vitality. States of fear, stress, and incoherence activate genes associated with inflammation, aging, and disease. This means your consciousness is literally sculpting your biology in real time. Every moment of presence, every choice toward love, every return to coherence is sending signals to your cellular structure, optimizing your physical form for greater health, longevity, and capacity. But the implications go even deeper. As you activate quantum consciousness, you start recognizing that what you call your body is actually a temporary crystallization of consciousness in physical form. Your cells are constantly regenerating, You literally have a new body every 7 years. What maintains the continuity isn't the physical matter. It's the informational pattern, the consciousness template that's organizing the matter. This is why consciousness can heal the body so rapidly. When you change the informational pattern, the organizing template, the physical matter reorganizes itself to match. This isn't miracle healing. It's quantum mechanics. You're simply updating the software that's running the hardware. As this understanding deepens, you start relating to your body not as a machine that occasionally breaks down, but as a conscious partner in your evolution. You begin communicating with your body, listening to its wisdom, honoring its intelligence. You realize that every symptom, every sensation, every signal your body sends is consciousness communicating with consciousness. Your body becomes a feedback system for your quantum state. When you're in coherence, your body feels vital, energized, alive. When you're out of alignment, your body sends signals, tension, fatigue, discomfort, inviting you back into coherence. Instead of ignoring these signals or medicating them away, you start using them as guidance for maintaining your quantum consciousness. This transforms your relationship with what we call health and illness. From quantum consciousness, you realize that perfect health isn't the absence of symptoms. It's the presence of dynamic balance, conscious awareness, and responsive adaptation. Your body is constantly adjusting, adapting, optimizing itself based on the information it's receiving from your consciousness. I'm curious, have you noticed any shifts in your physical body or energy levels as you've become more aware of your quantum consciousness? Share your observations below, as these experiences often validate the profound mind-body connection we're exploring. This is why stress affects health so dramatically. Stress isn't just a psychological state. It's an informational signal that tells your body it's under threat. Your immune system responds accordingly, shutting down long-term repair and regeneration to focus on immediate survival. Chronic stress means chronic survival mode, which leads to chronic inflammation, accelerated aging, and eventual breakdown. But here's the quantum shift. When you realize that stress is primarily about your interpretation of events rather than the events themselves, you gain tremendous power. The same situation that creates overwhelm in one person creates excitement in another. The difference isn't the situation, it's the consciousness experiencing the situation. From quantum awareness, you start choosing your interpretations consciously. Instead of automatically assuming threat, you begin looking for opportunity. Instead of defaulting to victimhood, you explore your creative options. Instead of collapsing into helplessness, you remember your power to choose your response. This doesn't mean denying difficult realities or pretending everything is perfect. It means recognizing that your consciousness is always more powerful than your circumstances. It means understanding that how you relate to what's happening is more important than what's actually happening. And this brings us to one of the most profound aspects of quantum consciousness activation: the recognition that reality is fundamentally relational. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything exists in relationship to everything else. You are not separate from your environment. You are in constant dynamic relationship with it. Your consciousness is not contained within your skull. It's distributed throughout your entire field of experience. The boundaries you thought separated you from the world were illusions created by limited perception. When quantum consciousness activates, these boundaries begin dissolving, and you start experiencing what mystics have called unity consciousness. This isn't a philosophical concept, it's a lived reality. You start feeling your connection to nature, to other people, to the cosmos itself. You realize that the separation between inner and outer, self and other, observer and observed, was never real. It was simply a function of consciousness forgetting its own infinite nature. From this unified perspective, service becomes natural, effortless, joyful. You're not helping others out of obligation or guilt. You're recognizing that there are no others. There's only one consciousness experiencing itself through countless forms. When you serve another, you're serving yourself. When you heal another, you're healing yourself. When you love another, you're loving yourself. This is the ultimate expression of quantum consciousness. The recognition that individual awakening and collective awakening are not separate processes. As you activate your quantum awareness, you're contributing to the activation of global consciousness. Your personal transformation is simultaneously a planetary transformation. If this content is touching something in you, if you're feeling the resonance of what we're exploring together, then I invite you to subscribe not just to this channel, but to this frequency, this movement, this space where consciousness and science meet. I want to share something with you that's been specifically designed for this exact moment in your journey. It's not a course, not a lecture, not another collection of ideas. It's a map, a guide for where you are right now. Inside my comprehensive guide, you'll discover the 7 quantum principles that allow you to live from your expanded self. Not occasionally, but consistently. It will show you how to stabilize your frequency even when external reality hasn't caught up. How to shift your nervous system out of survival and into creation. How to stop chasing your future and start collapsing it into the now. You'll learn practices that blend neuroscience, quantum physics, and spiritual coherence, all designed to help you integrate this state, not as a peak experience, but as a new normal. Because you didn't come here to temporarily awaken. You came here to become the signal, to live from the field, to remember who you are, and then embody it without compromise. The field isn't waiting for you to be perfect. It's waiting for you to be present and fully, unapologetically, and consciously. Your quantum consciousness isn't a concept. It's your next reality. And now, it's time to live from it. Take a moment and drop one word below that captures the energy you're choosing, the transformation you're embracing. Let it be your energetic signature to the quantum field. And subscribe not just to stay connected, but to stay coherent, to stay elevated. Because the more of us who embody this truth, the more the world reflects that reality.